Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time, way back, to an age where the flickers of candlelight danced across rough-hewn tables and the scent of hearth smoke mingled with simmering stews. Imagine yourself in a bustling medieval kitchen, maybe in a grand castle or a humble cottage, the clatter of earthenware and the sizzle of fat filling the air. You're watching as someone carefully chops herbs, grinds spices, and stirs a pot. But this isn't just dinner they're preparing. Oh no, they're concocting something far more potent. You see, in the Middle Ages, food wasn't just about sustenance. It was an intricate tapestry of belief, superstition, and fervent hope, especially when it came to matters of the heart, or perhaps a bit lower. Tonight, we're going to gently explore the curious history of aphrodisiac foods in the Middle Ages. Those ingredients believed to ignite passion, inspire fertility, and perhaps even mend a broken heart. You probably won't survive this journey without a sudden craving for something surprisingly bizarre, like powdered unicorn horn, so be warned. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to see how far these sleepy stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. In the medieval mind, everything was connected, from the stars above to the very soil beneath their feet. This holistic worldview extended profoundly to what they ate. It wasn't just about calories or flavor. Every ingredient carried symbolic weight, every meal a potential influence on body and soul. And when it came to the rather intimate matter of human desire, well, food was often seen as the first and most accessible tool in the medieval lover's arsenal. They believed that certain foods could heat the blood, moisten the humors, and generally get things moving in the right direction. It was a fascinating blend of ancient medical theory, folk wisdom, and a good dash of wishful thinking. Think of it less as a science and more as a delightful, if sometimes baffling, culinary art form aimed squarely at romance. Consider, for instance, the very basic premise, the idea of humors. Medieval medicine, heavily influenced by the ancient Greeks like Hippocrates and later refined by Galen, operated on the principle that the human body was made up of four fundamental humors: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. Each of these was associated with specific qualities, hot or cold, wet or dry. For a person to be healthy, these humors needed to be in perfect balance. And you guessed it, food played a crucial role in maintaining or restoring this balance. So, if someone was believed to be lacking in a certain heat or moisture necessary for amorous pursuits, the solution often lay in the kitchen, not the apothecary. Well, sometimes the apothecary was the kitchen. This wasn't just about feeling good, mind you. It was about achieving a desirable state of being, where the body was primed for procreation, an incredibly important aspect of life in an era with high mortality rates. Take the case of King Henry VIII, a man whose marital escapades are legendary. While much has been written about his political motivations and his rather dramatic approach to divorce, his desire for a male heir was paramount. According to Eleanor Herman's Sex with Kings, royal physicians and cooks were constantly tasked with ensuring the king's virility. They would prepare dishes rich in what were considered hot and moist foods, designed to invigorate him. We're talking about things like spiced wine, rich meats, and certain root vegetables, all aimed at bolstering his perceived reproductive vigor. It wasn't just a casual suggestion. It was a matter of state. Imagine the pressure on the royal chef, knowing that the fate of a dynasty might hinge on whether or not the king found his goose pate sufficiently inspiring. A gentle chuckle at the thought of a chef sweating over a souffle, not for flavor, but for a king's performance, is certainly understandable. Now, for a slightly quirky tidbit, some medieval texts suggest that consuming sparrow brains was considered a particularly potent aphrodisiac. Yes, you heard that right, little bird brains. The logic, if you can call it that, was rooted in sympathetic magic. Sparrows were known for their prolific breeding habits and their rather enthusiastic mating rituals. Therefore, by eating the brain of a creature so clearly overflowing with amorous energy, one might absorb some of that same vitality. It's a culinary choice that, thankfully, didn't make it into modern haute cuisine, Can you imagine ordering that at a fancy restaurant? Yes, I'll have the sparrow brain, medium rare, please. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were purely symbolic, deeply ingrained medical theory, or simply convenient excuses for enjoying rich, flavorful meals. While the scientific understanding of nutrition and physiology was rudimentary at best, the psychological power of belief should not be underestimated. If you genuinely believed a certain dish would make you more desirable or potent, perhaps it did, if only through the placebo effect. The mind, after all, is a powerful thing, capable of turning a simple carrot into a veritable love potion. This blend of the practical and the mystical is a hallmark of medieval thought, and it certainly made dinner time a lot more interesting. They weren't just eating, they were performing a ritual, a hopeful gesture towards a desired outcome. You can almost picture a medieval couple, perhaps a nervous suitor and his intended, sharing a meal, each bite laden with unspoken expectation. Was that a knowing glance across the table as a particularly heating spice was served? Did a shared plate of something supposedly invigorating create a subtle shift in the atmosphere? The theater of it all is quite charming. It wasn't about quick fixes or instant gratification. It was a slow, deliberate process, much like the slow unfolding of a medieval romance itself. And as we drift deeper into this topic, you'll find that many of these food beliefs were rooted not just in ancient medical texts, but in direct observation of the natural world, however misinterpreted those observations might have been. The sheer earnestness of their belief, despite the lack of modern scientific backing, is what makes this journey so endearing. They truly believed that what went into the body directly influenced what came out of it, in every sense of the word. As you settle deeper into your pillow, let's turn our attention from general theories to the specific ingredients that spark desire in the medieval imagination. And first on our list of love-inducing edibles are spices. Now, in the Middle Ages, spices were not just flavor enhancers, they were luxury items, often more valuable than gold, transported across vast distances along perilous trade routes. The very act of acquiring them spoke of wealth and exoticism, adding to their mystique. These weren't just sprinkled on food, they were revered, almost magical, imbued with the warmth of distant lands and the power to ignite hidden passions. Imagine a merchant ship, creaking under the weight of precious cargo, arriving at a European port. The air, usually thick with the scent of fish and damp earth, would suddenly be infused with the heady aromas of cinnamon from Ceylon, ginger from India, and cloves from the Spice Islands. These scents alone were enough to transport the medieval mind, hinting at something beyond the mundane. And when these spices found their way into the kitchen, their effect was believed to be even more profound. The prevailing medical theory, remember our humors from section 1, suggested that hot and dry foods increased body heat and stimulated the blood. Spices, with their inherent warmth and pungency, fit this bill perfectly. Cinnamon, for example, was highly prized. It was believed to warm the body and stimulate circulation, making it a prime candidate for a love potion. You might find it in spiced wines, known as hippocras, or mixed into sweet confections. Think of a medieval lady, perhaps nibbling on a sweet spiced biscuit, hoping it would make her more alluring to a potential suitor. It wasn't just about the taste, it was about the feeling it evoked, the gentle flush to the cheeks, the subtle quickening of the pulse. Then there was ginger, another superstar of the medieval spice rack. Like cinnamon, ginger was considered hot and dry, making it a popular choice for invigorating the system. It was often candied or added to rich meat dishes. The biting warmth of ginger was thought to stimulate the stomach and, by extension, the entire digestive system, leading to a general feeling of vitality. And naturally, where there was vitality, there was believed to be an increase in amorous inclination. One could imagine a medieval gentleman, preparing for a long evening of wooing, perhaps indulging in a generous portion of ginger spice something or other, convinced it would give him the necessary oomph. Nutmeg and cloves also held significant sway. Nutmeg, with its intoxicating aroma, was often associated with euphoria and a sense of well-being. Some medieval texts even suggested it could promote fertility. Cloves, with their distinct warm and sweet aroma, were thought to be particularly potent for women, helping to warm the womb and prepare the body for conception. Imagine the elaborate spice blends concocted in a medieval kitchen, each pinch measured with intention, a silent prayer for passion or progeny accompanying every stir. A particularly fascinating aspect of this spicy allure comes from the narratives surrounding royal courts. Eleanor Herman, in Sex with Kings, recounts tales of monarchs who went to great lengths to acquire rare spices, not just for their culinary delight, but for their perceived power in the bedchamber. Take the story of a certain French king, whose identity is somewhat debated by historians, who would supposedly consume an absurd amount of ground nutmeg mixed with honey before important diplomatic meetings, believing it would enhance his charisma and, shall we say, persuasive powers in all matters, including those of a more personal nature with visiting dignitaries or their wives. It was a subtle, almost clandestine form of culinary diplomacy, where the spice cupboard held as much influence as the armory. You can almost picture his advisors whispering, "More nutmeg, Majesty, for the good of the kingdom." It's quite amusing to think of statecraft being fueled by a spice rack. Now for a truly quirky tidbit, some medieval medical treatises, drawing from ancient Arabic texts, even recommended using powdered Spanish fly, cantharides beetles, as an aphrodisiac. This was, to put it mildly, an incredibly dangerous practice. Spanish fly contains cantharidin, a highly toxic chemical that causes severe irritation and inflammation of the urinary and reproductive tracts, often leading to agonizing pain, kidney damage, and even death. The effect it produced was due to this irritation, mistaken for arousal. Thankfully, its use was not widespread among the general populace due to its obvious lethal consequences. But the fact that it was even considered speaks volumes about the desperate lengths some would go to, driven by the desire for enhanced passion. It reminds you of why perhaps it's a good thing we have modern medicine and less enthusiastic approaches to romance. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of spices was primarily for flavor, preservation, or indeed for their perceived medicinal and aphrodisiac properties. While the wealthy certainly reveled in their taste, the common belief in their humoral properties undoubtedly fueled their demand and elevated their status far beyond mere seasoning. It's hard to disentangle the culinary from the medicinal in the medieval mind, as they were often one and the same. The very act of cooking was a form of alchemy, transforming raw ingredients into something that could nourish, heal, or, in this case, enchant. So as you drift further, imagine the warm, exotic sense of cinnamon, ginger, and nutmeg permeating a medieval hall, not just pleasing the palate, but whispering promises of passion and fertility. It was a world where dinner could be an adventure, and a spice rack, a treasure chest of desires. The medieval appreciation for spices wasn't just about taste. It was about a profound belief in their power to warm the soul, and more practically, to warm the body for matters of the heart. Drifting now from the fiery embrace of exotic spices, let's descend into the earth, where medieval folk believed a more grounded, yet equally potent magic resided, in root vegetables. You might picture humble carrots or sturdy turnips, but to the medieval mind, these subterranean treasures were far more than simple fare. They were imbued with the very essence of the earth, often associated with fertility and strength, and therefore believed to possess the power to awaken primal desires. Imagine a farmer, perhaps after a long day tilling the soil, pulling up a gnarled parsnip or a plump turnip. These vegetables, growing hidden beneath the surface, were seen as holding secret energies, a quiet power. Unlike the fiery spices, roots were often associated with the moist humor, providing a different kind of balance to the medieval diet, and thus to the body's internal workings. The belief was that by consuming these earthy delights, one could draw upon the foundational vigor of the soil itself, promoting robustness and, naturally, reproductive capability. One of the most lauded root vegetables for its purported aphrodisiac qualities was the parsnip. Before the widespread adoption of potatoes from the Americas, parsnips were a staple, often sweeter and more flavorful than their modern counterparts. Medieval physicians and herbalists often prescribed parsnips for increasing vitality and promoting fertility, particularly for men. They were commonly roasted, stewed, or even used in sweet dishes. The idea was that their hearty, nourishing nature translated directly into a more robust physical state, making one more amenable to amorous pursuits. It's quite charming, really, to think of a simple root vegetable being viewed with such optimistic anticipation. Then there were carrots. While perhaps not as universally acclaimed as parsnips, carrots, especially the red and purple varieties common in the Middle Ages before the orange Dutch cultivar became dominant, were also believed to have some stimulative properties. Their color alone might have contributed to this belief, as red was often associated with blood and passion. They were often consumed raw or lightly cooked, a crunchy addition to a meal that promised more than just vitamins. You can almost hear a medieval spouse nudging their partner to "eat your carrots, dear, for our future." Even the humble onion and garlic, with their pungent aromas, found a place in the medieval aphrodisiac pantry. While perhaps not direct stimulants in the way spices were, they were considered warming and blood-moving, and thus indirectly beneficial. Garlic in particular was seen as a powerful agent used for everything from warding off evil spirits to invigorating the body. A strong dose of garlic before a romantic rendezvous might seem counterintuitive to us today, but in a world without breath mints, perhaps it was just part of the experience. Besides, if both parties consumed it, then no one noticed, right? Or maybe it was a subtle test of true affection. If you could tolerate your beloved's garlicky breath, then it must be real love. Consider the detailed advice given by some medieval medical writers. For instance, Peter Webb's The Erotic Spirit Through History touches upon the widespread medical theories of the time, which often prescribe specific root vegetables to address imbalances related to coldness or dryness in the body, conditions believed to impede desire. A medieval physician might recommend a regimen of boiled parsnips and leeks to a couple struggling with conception, believing these foods would warm the womb or strengthen the seminal fluid. It was a holistic approach where diet was intertwined with sexual health in a way that feels quaint, yet strangely intuitive, even if the underlying science was speculative. It wasn't about a fleeting sensation, but about long-term vigor. For a quirky historical tidbit, in some medieval European folklore, a mandrake root, with its uncanny human-like shape, was considered the ultimate aphrodisiac, was possessing immense magical and sexual power. However, due to its rarity, toxicity, and the terrifying belief that it shrieked lethally when pulled from the ground, it was more a subject of myth and legend than a practical culinary ingredient. People would sometimes use substitutes or carve other roots to resemble mandrake in hopes of tapping into its legendary properties. Imagine the lengths someone would go to just to get their hands on a root that supposedly screamed when harvested. That's dedication to romance, or perhaps desperation. Historians still argue whether the perceived aphrodisiac qualities of root vegetables were primarily a result of empirical observation. They certainly are nutritious and provide energy, or purely symbolic associations with their earthy origins and shapes. The phallic shape of some parsnips and carrots might have certainly played a part in their reputation, a prime example of sympathetic magic at play. Regardless, they were a testament to the medieval belief that the most profound influences could come from the humblest of sources. The quiet strength drawn from the soil was seen as a direct conduit to human vitality. So, as you gently drift, imagine the robust simplicity of a medieval meal, where a humble bowl of stew, rich with parsnips and perhaps a hint of garlic, was not just sustenance, but a hopeful offering to the forces of love and fertility. These subterranean treasures, quietly drawing strength from the earth, were believed to impart that strength to those who consumed them, promising not explosive passion, but a deep, enduring warmth and vigor. Leaving the earthy depths of root vegetables behind, we now ascend to the sun-kissed branches, where medieval hopes for passion often ripened in fruits of fertility's lore. For our medieval ancestors, fruit was more than just a sweet treat. It was often imbued with profound symbolic meaning, frequently tied to ideas of abundance, reproduction, and the very essence of life itself. Their shapes, their colors, their seeds, all were scrutinized for clues about their hidden powers, especially those related to love and fertility. Picture yourself in a bustling medieval marketplace, the air sweet with the scent of ripe apples and plump figs. A vendor calls out, extolling the virtues of his wares, not just for their taste, but for the vitality they promise. Unlike grains, which were seen as basic sustenance, or meats, which provided strength, fruits often carried a softer, more alluring association, a gentle whisper of nature's bounty and the promise of new life. Take the apple, for instance. You might think of Adam and Eve, and you wouldn't be wrong. The apple, in various cultures and mythologies, has long been a symbol of knowledge, temptation, and significantly, love and fertility. In medieval Europe, apples were often given as tokens of affection. The numerous seeds within an apple were seen as a direct representation of fertility and potential offspring. Some folk traditions suggested that if you cut an apple crosswise, the star shape revealed inside could be used in love divinations. Imagine a young maiden, perhaps on a moonlit night, carefully slicing an apple, hoping its inner secrets would reveal her true love. It's a wonderfully romantic image, imbued with simple, earnest hope. Then there was the fig, a fruit with an even more explicit reputation. Its fleshy, multi-seeded interior and somewhat suggestive shape led to its widespread association with fertility and sexuality. In many cultures, the fig tree itself was sacred, symbolizing abundance and prosperity. Medieval texts and folklore frequently referenced figs in contexts related to enhancing sexual desire and promoting conception. They were often consumed fresh or dried, a potent, earthy sweetness that promised more than just flavor. It makes you wonder how many medieval conversations about figs were actually subtle allusions to something else entirely. The pomegranate also held a significant place in the medieval lexicon of love. With its hundreds of glistening ruby-red seeds encased within a tough rind, it was an undeniable symbol of fertility and abundance. Like the apple, its internal structure was seen as a powerful visual metaphor for prolificacy. It appeared in religious art, classical mythology, and yes, in recipes designed to encourage conception. Offering a pomegranate might not have been as direct as a pickup line, but it was certainly a potent, silent declaration of intent. It's a beautifully complex fruit, and its symbolism only adds to its allure. Consider the role of symbolism, which, as Michel Foucault notes in The History of Sexuality, profoundly shaped perceptions of the body and desire. While Foucault's work largely covers later periods, his insights into how societies construct meanings around sexuality resonate with medieval attitudes towards food. The symbolic weight of fruits was not just incidental, it was central to their perceived efficacy as aphrodisiacs. The external appearance, the internal structure, and the very act of consuming a fruit like a fig or a pomegranate became a ritualistic engagement with the forces of creation and desire. For a quirky tidbit, some medieval texts mention the practice of placing specific fruits, particularly apples or quince, under one's pillow to induce erotic dreams or to attract a lover. The fruit was thought to absorb the sleeper's desires or emit an enchanting aroma that would draw in the desired person. It's a fascinating blend of aromatherapy and sympathetic magic, where a simple piece of fruit transformed into a nocturnal love charm. Perhaps it just made their sleeping chambers smell a little nicer, which, let's be honest, wouldn't have been a bad thing in medieval times. Historians still argue whether the primary reason for these fruity associations was truly based on observed effects or more heavily influenced by existing mythological and religious symbolism. While fruits are certainly healthy and provide energy, it's clear that the medieval mind layered layers of meaning onto them that went far beyond mere nutrition. The cultural narrative around these fruits was so strong that it likely created a powerful placebo effect, where belief itself was a key ingredient in the love potion. So as you gently drift, picture a medieval garden heavy with the scent of ripe fruit, each apple, fig, or pomegranate a silent promise of life, love, and fertility. In a world where every harvest was a miracle, these vibrant gifts from nature offered a tangible hope for connection and the continuation of the family line, turning a simple snack into a deeply symbolic act of desire. From the sweet allure of fruits, let's now turn our attention to something a bit more substantial, something that truly fueled the medieval body and was believed to fire up desire, meat and the mighty appetite. In a world where food scarcity was often a grim reality, meat was a symbol of wealth, status, and vitality. Its consumption was directly linked to strength, vigor, and a robust constitution, all qualities naturally associated with a healthy libido and the capacity for procreation. Imagine a medieval feast, perhaps in a lord's great hall. The air is thick with the aroma of roasted venison, spiced boar, or plump capons. Unlike the humble fare of peasants, these were dishes reserved for those who could afford them, a tangible display of power and abundance. The sheer act of consuming such rich, protein-heavy foods was believed to imbue the diner with the animal's own strength and virility. It wasn't just about satisfying hunger, it was about absorbing power. You can almost feel the warmth radiating from the fireplace, mingling with the rich scents of roasting meat, creating an atmosphere of comfort and indulgence that in itself might have been quite conducive to relaxation and perhaps other forms of pleasant activity. Medieval medical theory, still steeped in the humoral system, often classified meats as hot and moist or hot and dry, depending on the animal and its preparation. These qualities were considered ideal for stimulating the blood and warming the body, prerequisites for sexual activity. For instance, red meats like beef, venison, and boar were seen as particularly potent due to their hearty, warming nature. A man lacking in heat or vigor might be prescribed a diet rich in these meats, consumed with the intention of rebalancing his humors and igniting his passion. It's quite practical, really, if you consider that a well-nourished body generally has more energy for everything. They weren't just thinking about a quick fix, but about a sustained, healthy vitality that would support a productive life, which, of course, included the continuation of their family line. The idea was to build up the body's natural reserves, to make it robust and ready for all of life's demands. Even the preparation of the meat was thought to influence its aphrodisiac qualities. Roasting or grilling, methods that intensified the heat of the food, were preferred over boiling, which was often seen as diluting the meat's potent qualities. Spices, which we explored in Section 2, were almost always added to these meat dishes, further enhancing their perceived stimulating effects. Imagine a medieval cook carefully basting a roasted pheasant with a mixture of wine, ginger, and nutmeg, not just for taste, but for its intended amorous outcome. Every step was deliberate, a culinary spell woven into the meal, a hopeful contribution to the household's future. The presentation mattered too. A beautifully presented, steaming roast, perhaps garnished with herbs, would not only tantalize the taste buds, but also serve as a visual promise of the vitality it contained. It was a feast for all the senses, aimed at a very specific purpose. Consider a fascinating account from Eleanor Herman's Sex with Kings, where she details the diets of various European monarchs obsessed with producing heirs. King Henry IV of France, for instance, was reportedly advised by his physicians to consume enormous quantities of meat, particularly fowl and game, believing it would bolster his virility. He was renowned for his robust appetite and his numerous children, leading many to attribute his prolific progeny, at least in part, to his meat-heavy diet. It was a simpler time when a king's virility was a matter of state, and his dinner plate was a potential tool of diplomacy and dynasty building. His advisors would meticulously track his dietary intake almost as closely as they would his battle strategies. The pressure on the royal chefs must have been immense, knowing that the continuation of a royal line could, in part, be attributed to their culinary prowess. You can almost imagine the king's physician, a stern-faced man with a quill behind his ear, poring over ancient texts, prescribing specific cuts of meat and cooking methods, all aimed at ensuring the royal succession. It's quite amusing to think of such weighty matters being decided over a well-cooked steak, but that was the reality of the era. For a quirky tidbit, some medieval texts suggested that consuming the testicles of animals, such as bull or boar, was a powerful aphrodisiac, directly transferring the animal's virility to the eater. While certainly not for the faint of heart, this practice was rooted in sympathetic magic and the belief that like cures like, or like enhances like. The idea was that the very essence of masculinity, the source of reproductive power, could be absorbed by consuming the corresponding organ. It's a rather direct, if unappetizing, approach to enhancing one's own masculine vigor, and certainly a bold culinary choice. Imagine the courage, or perhaps desperation, required to partake in such a dish, all in the name of love and lineage. It makes modern dating seem rather tame by comparison, doesn't it? Perhaps a little too much information before bedtime, but it does highlight the extreme beliefs people held. Historians still argue whether the perceived benefits of a meat-rich diet were due to actual nutritional gains. More protein and calories certainly provide energy, which helps with everything, including, energy, or simply a reflection of the social status associated with consuming such expensive foods. The psychological effect of eating a meal reserved for the elite, combined with the prevalent humoral theories, undoubtedly contributed to the belief in its aphrodisiac powers. It's difficult to separate the symbolic from the practical, especially when hunger was a constant companion for many. The very act of feasting, surrounded by abundance, could create a sense of well-being and confidence that was conducive to romantic pursuits. So, whether it was the actual nutrients or the power of belief, meat certainly held a potent place in the medieval quest for love and progeny. The perception often became reality in the minds of those who believed. So as you slowly drift into slumber, picture the grand medieval halls, filled with the rich aroma of roasted meats, the crackle of a warm fire, and the gentle murmur of conversation. Each succulent bite wasn't just about satisfying hunger. It was a potent declaration of life, strength, and the enduring desire for connection and continuation. For medieval people, a hearty meal was often the first step on the path to romance, a delicious bridge between sustenance and passion, a culinary promise whispered into the dim, cozy warmth of a medieval night. From the robust warmth of roasted meats, we now turn our gaze to the shimmering, mysterious depths of the oceans and rivers, where medieval folk sought a different kind of culinary magic, in seafood's subtle seductions. Unlike the heavy, grounding nature of land animals, fish and other aquatic creatures were often associated with coolness and moisture, yet paradoxically, they were also believed to possess unique properties that could stir desire and promote fertility. You might not immediately think of a cod fillet as the key to a passionate evening, but in the Middle Ages, with their very different understanding of the body and nature, these connections were deeply ingrained. Imagine a bustling medieval fishing village at dawn, the scent of salt and fresh catches hanging in the crisp air. Fishermen haul in their nets, their boats laden with glistening silver fish, crabs, and perhaps even some curious mollusks. For many, especially those living near coastal areas or major rivers, seafood was a staple, providing much-needed protein and variety in their diet. But beyond mere sustenance, certain types of seafood were thought to hold special powers related to love and procreation, largely due to their perceived qualities and, sometimes, their rather suggestive shapes. The rhythmic creak of the boats, the cries of gulls, the glint of sunlight on wet scales, all part of the sensory experience that lent itself to the mystique of these aquatic foods. The most famous medieval aphrodisiac from the sea, and one that still holds a certain mystique today, was the oyster. Even in the Middle Ages, oysters were renowned for their supposed ability to enhance libido. The exact reasons for this belief are a bit murky, but several theories abound. Some attributed it to their high zinc content, a mineral now known to play a role in reproductive health, though medieval people wouldn't have understood the biochemistry. They simply observed that consuming oysters seemed to have a particular effect. Others pointed to their soft, fleshy texture and their resemblance to certain human organs, a classic example of sympathetic magic, where a food's appearance was thought to dictate its power. Still others believed it was the simple act of consuming a raw, live creature that transferred its vitality and life force directly to the eater. Imagine a medieval nobleman, perhaps trying to impress a lady at a lavish banquet, gracefully slurping down a dozen oysters from a silver platter, convinced he was preparing for a night of unparalleled passion. It's certainly a more elegant and less alarming image than the sparrow brains we discussed earlier, isn't it? The smooth, briny taste, the cool slipperiness, it all contributed to an experience that felt both luxurious and potent. Beyond oysters, other aquatic delights also had their proponents. Certain types of fish, particularly those considered fat or rich in medieval dietary terms, like salmon, sturgeon, or eel, were believed to be nourishing and restorative, thus indirectly contributing to overall vitality and desire. Their fatty content was seen as a source of good humors that could lubricate the body and warm the blood. Their slippery texture might also have played a symbolic role, associating them with the fluidity and mystery of passion. Even humble eels, despite their snake-like appearance and somewhat challenging texture, were sometimes recommended for their fortifying properties, perhaps due to their perceived longevity or their ability to navigate unseen depths. The variety of fish available, from freshwater catches to saltwater giants, meant a wide range of options for those seeking a culinary boost to their romantic endeavors. Consider the detailed accounts found in period medical texts. Michel Foucault's The History of Sexuality, while focusing on later periods, provides a profound framework for understanding how medical discourse shaped perceptions of the body and its functions, including sexuality. In medieval contexts, physicians, drawing heavily on Galenic theories, often categorized fish based on their humoral qualities, recommending different types for various conditions, including those related to sexual vigor. A cold individual, for example, might be advised to consume fish prepared with warming spices, attempting to balance their humors and ignite their inner fire. Conversely, someone considered too hot might be given lighter, cooler fish. The intricacies of these dietary prescriptions reveal a deep belief in the power of food to alter one's physical and emotional state, and these recommendations were taken very seriously, often forming the basis of a patient's entire treatment plan. It wasn't just about feeling better, it was about achieving a desirable physiological balance. For a quirky tidbit, some medieval coastal communities believed that consuming the roe, fish eggs of certain fish, particularly cod or sturgeon, would increase fertility. The sheer abundance of eggs within the roe sack was seen as a direct metaphor for prolificacy, a visible promise of countless potential lives. It was thought that by ingesting this concentrated essence of life, one could enhance their own reproductive capacity. While perhaps a logical leap, it highlights the medieval fascination with visible signs of fertility in the natural world and their attempts to harness that power for themselves. It's a bit like wishing upon 1,000 tiny stars, isn't it? But in a more edible and perhaps slightly slimy form. This belief was so strong that fishing for roe could become a specialized and lucrative activity, adding another layer of value to the humble fish. Historians still argue whether the aphrodisiac reputation of seafood, particularly oysters, was primarily based on genuine physiological effects, like the zinc content, which is only a recent discovery in terms of understanding its specific role, or more on symbolic associations and cultural beliefs. While modern science has illuminated some nutritional connections that might, indirectly, support general well-being, it's clear that the medieval understanding was rooted in a blend of observation, superstition, and perhaps a good dose of placebo effect. The perception of a food's power often became its reality, a powerful testament to the mind-body connection even in an age without scientific understanding of it. The very anticipation of an effect could, in itself, create a subtle physiological response. So, as you gently drift, imagine the cool, briny taste of an oyster, or the rich, delicate flavor of a perfectly cooked fish, consumed in the flickering light of a medieval tavern or a grand dining hall. These creatures from the watery depths were believed to hold a subtle yet potent magic, promising not a roaring fire, but a gentle, persistent current of desire that flowed from the sea directly into the heart of medieval romance, adding another intriguing layer to the complex tapestry of medieval culinary beliefs. Having explored the treasures from the land and sea, we now turn our attention to the vibrant, fragrant world of herbs, nature's own elixirs. In the Middle Ages, long before pharmacies as we know them existed, the garden was often the primary source of medicine, and yes, even love potions. Herbs, with their diverse aromas, flavors, and perceived medicinal properties, were painstakingly cultivated and carefully combined, believed to hold the subtle power to influence the body's humors and ignite desire. Imagine a medieval monastery garden or a humble cottage patch brimming with fragrant plants. The air is thick with the scent of mint, rosemary, and thyme, perhaps mingling with the more pungent notes of rue or mugwort. For medieval people, these plants weren't just decorative, they were living pharmacies, each leaf, flower, or root holding a specific purpose. And when it came to matters of the heart and body, certain herbs were considered indispensable for their purported aphrodisiac qualities. One of the most commonly cited herbs for amorous purposes was mint. While often associated with freshness, Various types of mint were believed to be warming and stimulating, capable of stirring the passions. It was often added to baths, used in poultices, or incorporated into drinks and dishes. The very act of inhaling its invigorating aroma was thought to awaken the senses, making one more receptive to romance. It's a surprisingly pleasant thought, isn't it? A medieval couple, perhaps sipping a mint-infused brew, hoping for a spark. Then there was rosemary, an herb deeply steeped in symbolism, particularly associated with remembrance and fidelity. While not a direct aphrodisiac in the same way some other herbs were, its presence in love spells and preparations was undeniable. It was believed to strengthen bonds and ensure lasting affection. A sprig of rosemary might be carried by a suitor or placed in a lover's garment, a silent promise of devotion. Its pungent, woody aroma was also thought to invigorate the mind and body, indirectly contributing to overall vitality. Perhaps a less obvious, but still significant player was nettle. Yes, the stinging nettle. While certainly prickly to the touch, medieval herbalists believed that when properly prepared, often by boiling or drying, it could have surprising effects. Some texts attributed a warming and stimulating quality to nettle, suggesting it could invigorate the blood and enhance virility. It's certainly a testament to medieval determination when people were willing to handle something that would sting them, all for the sake of love. That's commitment, I suppose. Consider the extensive herbal compendiums, known as herbals, that were popular during the Middle Ages. These texts, often beautifully illustrated, detailed the medicinal properties of countless plants, including those believed to influence desire. Peter Webb's The Erotic Spirit Through History delves into how these folk remedies and learned medical practices intertwined with many herbal prescriptions aimed at restoring humoral balance to promote a healthy libido. These prescriptions weren't just random guesses, they were based on centuries of accumulated observations, however flawed. For example, a person thought to be cold in temperament might be given a tea brewed from hot herbs like ginger, which we've covered, or savory to reestablish the desired internal warmth. For a quirky tidbit, some medieval folklore suggested that growing basil in one's garden would attract a lover. The stronger and more vibrant the basil plant, the more passionate and devoted the suitor would be. It's a charmingly simple form of sympathetic magic, where the vitality of the plant mirrors the desired vitality in romance. One can almost picture a medieval maiden tending her basil patch with extra care, watering it diligently, perhaps whispering secret hopes to its leaves. It makes you wonder how many perfectly ordinary basil plants inadvertently became unwitting participants in medieval matchmaking. Historians still argue whether the perceived effects of these herbs were due to actual, albeit subtle, physiological impacts, or primarily to the potent power of belief and ritual. Many herbs do contain compounds with mild effects on the body, but it's undeniable that the cultural context and the fervent belief in their magical or medicinal properties played a significant role. The placebo effect, as we understand it today, was likely a powerful force in medieval herbalism. So as you slowly drift deeper into sleep, imagine the subtle, comforting sense of a medieval herb garden, each plant a miniature pharmacy, a quiet promise of warmth, vitality, and perhaps a gentle stir of passion. In a world where nature was understood as a living, breathing entity, these humble herbs were believed to hold the very essence of desire, waiting to be unlocked by those who knew their secrets. From the fragrant whispers of herbs, we now transition to something universally sweet and often symbolic of pure delight, honey's golden promises. In the Middle Ages, long before refined sugar became widely available, honey was the primary sweetener, revered not just for its taste, but for its myriad perceived medicinal and even mystical properties. Its golden hue and viscous texture, combined with its origin from diligent bees, imbued it with an aura of warmth, purity, and, yes, a gentle power to entice. This wasn't just food, it was liquid gold, a concentrate of nature's best, carefully collected by tiny, buzzing alchemists. Imagine a medieval apiary, perhaps nestled at the edge of a sun-dappled forest, the soft, rhythmic hum of thousands of bees filling the air as they flit between blossoms, diligently gathering nectar. The sight of golden honeycombs, heavy and dripping with their sweet bounty, must have seemed like a gift from the heavens, a miraculous product of nature's tireless work. Honey was seen as a product of nature's industriousness and purity, often associated with fertility and abundance due to the sheer volume of production from a single hive. This perception naturally extended to its potential influence on human relationships and desires. The very act of harvesting it was often a gentle, meditative process, adding to its calming mystique. Medieval medical texts, deeply influenced by the ancient world, often classified honey as hot and moist, making it a perfect candidate for balancing humors and stimulating the body in a gentle way. It was believed to warm the stomach, invigorate the blood, and even act as a natural restorative, providing energy and vitality. For someone feeling a bit listless, cold in temperament, or perhaps lacking in romantic inclination, a spoonful of honey, often mixed with other ingredients, might have been just what the physician ordered. It's a far more pleasant remedy than some of the more challenging concoctions we've encountered in our journey so far, isn't it? A spoonful of sugar, or in this case honey, does help the medicine go down, and perhaps a little romance along with it. The inherent sweetness was seen not just as flavor, but as a subtle energy boost, a quick way to restore vigor. Honey was incorporated into countless medieval dishes, from sweet pastries and puddings to savory meat glazes, often mixed with warming spices like cinnamon or ginger to enhance its perceived aphrodisiac effects. Imagine a medieval couple, perhaps on a quiet evening by the hearth, sharing a bowl of spiced honeyed apples, the warmth and sweetness slowly permeating their senses, perhaps creating a cozy, intimate atmosphere conducive to affection. It wasn't just about the taste. It was about the subtle, pervasive feeling of comfort, well-being, and gentle invigoration that honey imparted. The very act of sharing such a treat would have been a tender gesture, adding another layer to its romantic appeal. Consider a poignant account, perhaps not directly about sex in the crude sense, but certainly about profound longing and desire that touches upon the use of honey. While Vatsyayana's Kama Sutra is an ancient Indian text and not from medieval Europe, it offers universal insights into the art of pleasure and seduction, often mentioning various preparations to enhance desire and attraction. Though the Kama Sutra itself wasn't directly known in medieval Europe, similar principles of using natural ingredients to subtly influence the body and emotions were widely shared through various cultural exchanges and local traditions. European medieval texts, often influenced by translated Arabic medical treatises, which themselves drew from ancient Eastern knowledge, frequently spoke of concoctions involving honey for strength, virility, and even to sweeten the disposition of a beloved. One particularly interesting account, found in an old collection of medieval love lore, describes a potion purportedly given to a nobleman by a clandestine lover. It was a mixture of honey, powdered exotic roots, and a secret herb intended to make him burn with desire solely for her. Whether it worked is of course open to debate. The power of suggestion and the nobleman's own inclinations were surely at play, but the intent was certainly there, woven into the sweet, golden threads of the honey. It suggests a subtle manipulation, a gentle nudge towards affection, rather than a forceful command, a romantic tactic veiled in culinary delight. For a quirky tidbit, some medieval folk beliefs held that if a person, especially a woman, was struggling with infertility, they should drink a specific mead, honey wine, that had been brewed during a full moon. The moon, with its powerful gravitational pull and cyclical phases, was often associated with fertility cycles and the ebb and flow of life, especially for women. Combined with the life-giving, abundant properties of honey, this lunar-infused mead was believed to create a potent elixir for conception. It's a charming blend of astronomy, simple fermentation, and hopeful desire, all swirling together in a gentle, bubbling brew that would have been consumed with quiet anticipation. It's also a rather pleasant excuse to drink more mead, isn't it? Much more enjoyable than some other medieval remedies. Historians still argue whether the perceived aphrodisiac properties of honey were due to any inherent biological effect beyond its basic nutritional value, or simply its profound psychological association with sweetness, purity, nourishment, and abundance. While honey is undoubtedly a source of energy and easily digestible nutrients, its role as a love food was likely more cultural and symbolic than strictly pharmacological, especially in the context of specific romantic outcomes. The power of suggestion, especially when combined with a delicious and comforting food, should never be underestimated. The belief itself could create a subtle physiological response, a gentle warmth or sense of well-being that would be interpreted as a stirring of desire. So as you gently drift deeper into slumber, imagine the warm, golden glow of honey slowly dissolving in a medieval cup or spread thinly over a piece of bread, perhaps by the flickering light of a tallow candle. Its sweetness, its inherent warmth, and its subtle promise of vitality offered a gentle, comforting path to connection and affection. A golden thread connecting medieval hearts through the simple, delicious magic of the beehive. It was a symbol of nature's generosity, a quiet indulgence, and a hopeful whisper of love in a bustling, often challenging world. Having savored the golden sweetness of honey, we now flow into another potent medieval elixir, wine and the warming spirit. In the Middle Ages, wine was far more than just a beverage. It was a staple, often safer to drink than water, and deeply integrated into daily life, religious rituals, and of course, social gatherings. But beyond its practical uses, wine was believed to possess a unique power to alter one's disposition, loosen inhibitions, and subtly ignite the flames of desire. Imagine a bustling medieval tavern, the air thick with the murmur of voices, the clatter of tankards, and the earthy scent of spilled wine. Or perhaps a quiet evening in a noble's chamber, where goblets clink softly. Wine, particularly red wine, was classified in humoral theory as hot and wet. This combination was considered ideal for warming the body, expanding the blood vessels, and generally promoting a sense of well-being and openness. It was believed that a measured amount of wine could dispel melancholy, encourage merriment, and thus make one more receptive to amorous advances. It's a belief that perhaps isn't entirely alien to modern sensibilities, is it? Though we might attribute it more to chemistry than humors. The preparation of wine also played a crucial role in its perceived effects. Spiced wines, known as Hippocras, from Hippocrates, linking it to ancient medicine, were immensely popular. These concoctions involved infusing wine with a variety of warming spices like cinnamon, ginger, cloves, and nutmeg, all the usual suspects we've already explored. The spices were thought to enhance wine's natural warming properties, making it an even more potent elixir for love. Imagine a medieval host pouring a rich, fragrant Hippocras, knowing that each sip was designed not just to please the palate, but to gently lower inhibitions and foster a convivial, perhaps even flirtatious atmosphere. It was a subtle art of persuasion, bottled and served. Beyond the general warming effect, wine was sometimes specifically prescribed in medieval medical texts for various ailments, including those related to reproductive health or a lack of vitality. A physician might recommend a particular vintage or a spiced wine blend to a couple struggling with conception, believing it would invigorate both partners. The gentle intoxication brought on by wine was also seen as a way to relax the mind, allowing for a more uninhibited expression of affection. Consider an intriguing anecdote, perhaps less about overt sex, but more about the delicate dance of seduction facilitated by wine. Eleanor Herman, in Sex with Kings, often alludes to the strategic use of wine in royal courts, not just for pleasure, but for political maneuvering and romantic conquests. There are accounts of lavish banquets where particular wines were served, chosen not only for their quality, but for their ability to soften wills and open hearts. Imagine a cunning queen subtly encouraging a Visan dignitary to partake in a particularly potent spiced wine, hoping to glean secrets or foster an alliance through a moment of shared intimacy. It was a delicate game, played with crystal goblets and murmured promises, where wine was a silent, intoxicating accomplice. It makes you wonder how many historical decisions were made under the subtle influence of a well-poured glass. For a quirky tidbit, some medieval alchemists and herbalists experimented with adding very specific, sometimes bizarre ingredients to wine, beyond just spices, to create even more powerful love potions. These might include powdered pearls for purity and luster, certain animal glands for virility, a slightly less palatable thought before bedtime, or even drops of a lover's blood, a truly fringe and thankfully rare practice for extreme sympathetic magic. Thankfully, most people stuck to the delightful spices. The idea was to create a truly bespoke elixir, potent enough to bend fate itself. Historians still argue whether the effects of wine on medieval desire were primarily physiological, due to alcohol's direct impact on the nervous system, or largely psychological and cultural, stemming from its long-standing association with festivity, passion, and spiritual ecstasy. While alcohol certainly lowers inhibitions, the medieval belief system layered a complex web of humoral theory and symbolic meaning onto every goblet. The cultural expectation that wine would open hearts likely contributed significantly to its perceived aphrodisiac qualities. So, as you gently drift deeper into sleep, imagine the warm, comforting glow of a medieval hearth, the soft clinking of glasses, and the rich, complex aroma of spiced wine. Each sip was more than just refreshment. It was a hopeful gesture, a gentle invitation to loosen the bonds of daily life and embrace the warming spirit of connection and affection, allowing ancient beliefs to slowly lull you into slumber. From the warming embrace of wine, we now glide into the very heart of medieval domestic life, the kitchen as apothecary. For medieval people, the lines between food, medicine, and even magic were wonderfully blurred. The cook, often a woman, was not just a provider of meals, but a knowledgeable practitioner of folk remedies, an herbalist, and sometimes a discreet creator of subtle concoctions aimed at influencing the affections. The kitchen wasn't merely a place for preparing sustenance. It was a potent laboratory where everyday ingredients were transformed into agents of health, healing, and heartfelt desire. Imagine the gentle glow of a medieval hearth, pots simmering, herbs drying from the rafters. You might see a woman meticulously grinding spices with a mortar and pestle, or stirring a brew with focused intensity. This wasn't just about flavoring a stew. It was about harnessing the inherent properties of each ingredient, guided by centuries of accumulated wisdom and a healthy dose of superstition. The idea was that what you consumed could directly alter your physical and emotional state, and this belief was particularly strong when it came to matters of love and fertility. The medieval cook's knowledge was a blend of practical experience, inherited wisdom, and the popular humoral theories we've mentioned. They understood which ingredients were hot, cold, wet, or dry, and how to combine them to achieve a desired effect. If a spouse seemed distant, or if a couple wished for children, the first recourse was often to the larder and the herb garden. There wasn't a separate love potion section in the medieval cookbook. Instead, the ingredients and techniques for stirring desire were woven throughout everyday culinary practices. It was a subtle art, often practiced quietly and discreetly. Take, for instance, the preparation of a seemingly simple broth. A medieval cook, perhaps noticing a lord's flagging interest in his lady, might add a pinch of this, a dash of that, a little extra ginger for warmth, some parsnips for earthy vigor, or perhaps a few carefully selected herbs, all believed to rekindle affection. These weren't overt spells, but rather gentle nudges, culinary suggestions to the body and spirit. The beauty of it lay in its subtlety. The intended recipient might never even know their soup was a love potion. Consider the role of everyday practitioners, often women, in shaping these culinary beliefs. Eleanor Herman's Sex with Kings highlights how not just royal physicians, but also less formal figures like trusted female attendants and even kitchen staff were often privy to the intimate dietary needs and desires of their patrons. These women often passed down recipes and remedies through generations, a quiet legacy of practical knowledge intertwined with romantic intent. One account, detailing the rather chaotic court of a certain French monarch, mentions a kitchen servant who was renowned for her invigorating pates, whispered to be exceptionally effective at ensuring male virility. Whether it was the rich ingredients or her secret blend of herbs, her dishes were always in high demand. It's comforting to think of such domestic figures holding subtle power, shaping history one meal at a time. For a quirky tidbit, some medieval cooks believed that the intent of the person preparing the food was as important as the ingredients themselves. If a dish meant to inspire love was prepared with anger or ill will, it could supposedly have the opposite effect, or even lead to digestive upset. This meant that the emotional state of the cook was considered crucial for a successful aphrodisiac meal. So, you had to stir your love potion with love, literally. It adds a rather charming, almost spiritual dimension to medieval cooking, doesn't it? Perhaps a little bit of positive energy was the true secret ingredient. Historians still argue whether these culinary practices were genuinely effective due to unrecognized pharmacological properties of the ingredients, or if they primarily relied on the placebo effect and the power of psychological suggestion. While modern science would dismiss most of these as ineffective, the belief system itself was incredibly powerful. If you believed a food would make you more desirable, you might act more confidently, and that confidence might, in turn, be attractive. The medieval kitchen was a place where hope was cooked into every meal. So, as you gently drift deeper into sleep, imagine the warm, bustling heart of a medieval home, the kitchen, where scents of simmering broths and baking breads mingle with the quiet, hopeful intentions of the cook. Here, everyday ingredients were transformed, not just into sustenance, but into subtle elixirs, carefully prepared to nurture love, mend affections, and fulfill the deepest desires of the medieval heart. It was a testament to the belief that harmony in the body and soul could begin right there, on the plate. From the cozy confines of the medieval kitchen, we now step into the grand, often opulent setting of royal banquets, where secret desires often simmered beneath layers of rich fabric and elaborate dishes. These weren't just meals, they were carefully orchestrated spectacles, designed to display power, forge alliances, and crucially, to facilitate the subtle dance of courtship and dynastic aspirations. And within this lavish theater, food played a surprisingly intimate and significant role in stirring passions and securing success. The very atmosphere of these events, filled with music, laughter, and the soft glow of hundreds of candles, was designed to create an intoxicating sense of possibility and indulgence. Imagine yourself amidst the glittering scene. Lords and ladies adorned in their finest silks and velvets, their jewels catching the light, musicians playing soft, lilting melodies on lutes and harps, and long tables groaning under the weight of roasted meats, exotic spices, and glistening fruits. The air would be thick with the scent of expensive perfumes, burning tapers, and the tantalizing aromas wafting from the kitchen, a symphony for the senses. Every dish served at a royal banquet was a statement, a reflection of the host's immense wealth, vast influence, and sophisticated taste. But for those with more specific intentions, certain foods were presented with a knowing wink, a subtle nod, believed to gently nudge the diners towards romantic inclination, or, even more importantly, towards ensuring the continuation of a royal lineage. The sheer abundance of food at these banquets was, in itself, considered a powerful aphrodisiac. In a time when food scarcity was a constant threat for the common people, a table laden with every conceivable delicacy, from roasted swans and peacocks to elaborate jellies and sugared fruits, signified prosperity, security, and a boundless capacity for life. These were all highly attractive qualities in a potential mate or royal consort. Rich, fatty meats, often sourced from royal hunting grounds, rare spices from distant lands that only the wealthiest could afford, and sweet confections made with precious honey or imported sugar were all consumed with gusto. These foods weren't just satisfying hunger, they were believed to invigorate the body, strengthen the vital spirits, and, by extension, profoundly influence the spirit and desire. A sense of satiation and well-being could very naturally lead to a more relaxed and open demeanor. Specific dishes might be subtly enhanced with ingredients known for their purported powers. Recall our earlier discussions about warming spices like cinnamon, ginger, and nutmeg, or the revered parsnip and tender asparagus. At a royal banquet, these would be incorporated into elaborate pies, grand roasts, delicate custards, or intricate jellies. The chefs, often highly skilled and well-versed in both culinary arts and popular medical beliefs, would carefully select and combine ingredients. The presentation, too, was key. A platter of perfectly ripe figs or pomegranates, artfully arranged to showcase their voluptuous forms or their abundance of seeds, would not just be a dessert, but a potent visual testament to fertility and prosperity. Such dishes were often strategically served to a royal couple with quiet, fervent hopes for an heir, making the meal a form of silent prayer or ritual. It was a gastronomic ballet, each movement, each course, designed to achieve a desired outcome that extended far beyond mere culinary pleasure. Consider the intricate web of personal and political ambition that often played out at these feasts. Eleanor Herman's Sex with Kings vividly illustrates how royal marriages were rarely just about love. They were matters of state, alliances between kingdoms, and ensuring progeny was paramount. Queens and their ladies-in-waiting, along with trusted royal physicians, would often meticulously plan meals designed to enhance the king's virility or the queen's fertility. There are fascinating, though often unverified, stories of queens subtly influencing their husband's diet, ensuring he consumed dishes rich in supposed aphrodisiacs before they retired for the night. Imagine the immense pressure on a queen, knowing that her future, her standing, and perhaps the very future of the kingdom rested heavily on her ability to produce an heir, and that a particular dish might be seen as aiding that crucial endeavor. It was a delicate, often desperate, dance, played out with knives and forks under the watchful eyes of the court. The anxiety alone could be enough to make a subtle culinary intervention seem like a viable solution. For a quirky tidbit, some medieval European courts, particularly those of the later Middle Ages, were known to employ not just food tasters for poison, but occasionally individuals whose subtle role was to observe the effects of certain dishes on the diners, especially the royal couple. While this sounds like something out of a spy novel, it speaks to the meticulous attention paid to the power of diet, even down to having designated observers to ensure the meal was just right for its intended, often intimate effect. Whether they were truly effective at assessing amorous sparks or simply observing digestive comfort, it adds another layer of intrigue to the already complex world of medieval palace life and its secret sciences. Historians still argue whether the elaborate and often rich diets of royalty truly had a significant direct impact on their reproductive success, or if the perceived effects were more a product of fervent belief, the inherent privilege of access to such foods, and the general good health afforded by a consistently abundant nutritious diet in an era of widespread famine. The psychological impact of belief, combined with the sheer comfort, energy, and vitality provided by such luxurious meals, certainly cannot be underestimated. A well-fed, comfortable, and confident monarch was likely a more energetic and capable monarch in all aspects of life, including the private ones. It's often difficult to separate the genuine physiological benefits from the powerful influence of cultural belief and expectation. So as you gently drift deeper into sleep, imagine the soft glow of countless candles illuminating a medieval banquet hall, the murmur of hushed conversation, the gentle clink of silverware against fine pottery, and the subtle, unspoken hopes woven into every sumptuous dish. In these grand settings, food was not merely sustenance. It was a silent, powerful ally in the pursuit of love, lineage, and the enduring desires that shape the destinies of kings and queens, slowly lulling you into a dream of bygone eras. Having indulged in the lavishness of royal banquets, let's now consider a less obvious yet equally fascinating intersection of food and desire. Within monastic meals, where hidden longings might have subtly influenced even the strictest diets. You might assume that cloistered life, dedicated to spiritual devotion and asceticism, would be utterly devoid of any thought of earthly desires, particularly those concerning passion or procreation. But even within the austere, disciplined walls of monasteries and convents, the profound impact of food on the body and mind was understood, and occasionally its influence on human passion was a quiet, though often unintended, consideration. Imagine the serene silence of a medieval refectory, the soft murmur of communal prayers accompanying a simple, often unvaried meal. Monks and nuns lived lives of rigorous discipline, often adhering to strict vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Their diets were meticulously designed, not for pleasure or indulgence, but primarily for spiritual purity, physical sustenance, and to aid in their contemplative practices. These meals would typically consist of plain bread, watery pottage, modest portions of vegetables, and perhaps fish on designated days. The very absence of rich, stimulating foods was a deliberate choice, intended to keep the body humble and the spirit elevated. The Church's numerous dietary restrictions, particularly regarding meat and certain rich, heating foods during Lent, Advent, and on weekly fast days, weren't just about penance or symbolic sacrifice. They were also aimed quite directly at subduing the flesh and controlling earthly desires, including those of a sexual nature. The prevailing belief, deeply rooted in humoral theory, was that hot and rich foods, such as red meat, strong spices, and heavy wines, inflamed the passions, made the blood thicker and more volatile, and thus made spiritual contemplation and the maintenance of celibacy significantly more difficult. Therefore, a diet emphasizing cooler, lighter foods like simple grains, legumes, root vegetables, and fish, which, as we discussed, were often seen as cooler in nature, was carefully prescribed to promote chastity, calm the senses, and focus the mind solely on divine matters. It's a fascinating inversion of our previous discussions about aphrodisiacs, isn't it? Instead of enhancing desire, the primary goal here was to temper, subdue, and redirect it. However, even within these seemingly monolithic and restrictive frameworks, nuances and unexpected effects sometimes existed. Certain permitted foods, despite their cooler or humble classification, might still have been seen to possess gentle restorative or even indirectly stimulating properties. Fish, for instance, a staple during fasts, was, as we discussed in Section 6, sometimes attributed with certain subtly invigorating qualities, particularly for the brain and nervous system, which could indirectly contribute to overall vitality. Grains and legumes, while humble, provided sustained energy and nourishment, which, by promoting overall good health, could also indirectly support all bodily functions, even those deemed inappropriate for monastic life. The human body, after all, has its own resilient nature. Consider the detailed rules found in monastic capitularies, collections of regulations, and the writings of monastic reformers. While these texts would never explicitly discuss aphrodisiacs, they reveal a deep, almost clinical awareness among monastic leaders of how diet could profoundly affect the emotional and physical state of their charges. Michel Foucault's The History of Sexuality explores the pervasive power of confession, self-discipline, and the meticulous regulation of desire in Christian thought and institutions. While his focus is broader and encompasses later historical periods, his work illuminates how the Church sought to control all aspects of human life, including the most intimate and carnal, through a rigorous system of disciplines, confessionals, and dietary controls. Monastic diets were a prime example of this disciplinary power, where every morsel consumed was, in a way, a spiritual act, meticulously chosen and often deliberately bland, aimed at shaping the self into a more pious and less fleshy being. It wasn't about denying appetite entirely, but about directing its immense power towards higher spiritual ends, a constant battle against the sin of gluttony and its perceived links to other carnal sins. For a quirky tidbit, some medieval monastic infirmaries, when treating ailing monks or nuns who might be suffering from a general lack of vitality, weakness, or even what was then considered melancholy of the spirit, which could sometimes encompass a lack of general zest for life or an inability to find spiritual joy, might subtly prescribe specific, often slightly richer or more palatable, permitted foods as part of their therapeutic regimen. These could include certain nourishing broths made from permitted meats, like fowl, if allowed on certain days, or even small amounts of spiced wine on special feast days, administered as a tonic or restorative. While certainly not overt aphrodisiacs, these were designed to restore a healthy humoral balance and overall vigor, indirectly invigorating the individual and helping them return to a state of physical and mental well-being necessary for their spiritual duties. It's a reminder that even in the most austere of environments, compassion for human frailty often found a subtle, practical path, recognizing the body's needs even when the spirit aimed for transcendence. Historians still argue whether the strict dietary rules of monastic life truly succeeded in universally suppressing all forms of earthly desire, or if they sometimes led to psychological and physical responses that were unexpected or even counterproductive, such as a heightened awareness of forbidden thoughts or cravings. The human body and mind are complex, and simply restricting food might not eliminate natural inclinations, but merely redirect them. Perhaps the hidden longing wasn't for indulgence, but simply for the basic human comforts and satisfaction that food could provide, which in turn allowed for greater inner peace and more focused spiritual contemplation, even if these were rarely acknowledged in official doctrine. So as you gently drift deeper into slumber, imagine the quiet refectory, the muted clink of bowls, and the slow, deliberate rhythm of monastic life. Even here, amidst profound spiritual striving and self-denial, the deep, fundamental connection between what one ate and how one felt, body, mind, and spirit, was profoundly understood. In these hidden corners of medieval life, food played its part, not always to ignite passion, but sometimes subtly to manage, temper, and direct the deep, enduring currents of human desire towards higher, quieter purposes, allowing the subtle echoes of their disciplined lives to lull you into your own peaceful dreams. From the disciplined tables of the monasteries, we now descend to the more commonplace, yet equally fascinating world of peasant fare and its simple pleasures. For the vast majority of people in the Middle Ages, life was a continuous cycle of labor and survival. Their meals were dictated by the seasons, the bounty of their fields, and the constraints of their meager resources. Yet, even within these humble confines, beliefs about food and its influence on vitality, and thus on the capacity for love and procreation, persisted, often rooted in practical observation and ancient folk wisdom. Imagine a rustic cottage, the flickering light of a single candle illuminating a rough wooden table. A family gathers, sharing a simple meal of porridge, coarse bread, and perhaps some root vegetables from their small garden. Meat was a rare luxury, reserved for special feast days or after a successful hunt. Spices were an unimaginable extravagance. Yet, for these resilient people, food was still understood as a fundamental force, affecting not just their physical strength, but their very spirits and their ability to continue their lineage. Their dietary wisdom was less about exotic ingredients and more about harnessing the power of the land they worked. Grains, like oats, barley, and rye, formed the bedrock of their diet, often consumed as pottage or in dense, dark bread. While not directly aphrodisiacs in the stimulating sense, these staples provided essential sustenance and energy, which when you think about it is a pretty foundational component of any activity requiring vigor, including, well, procreation. A well-fed peasant, even on humble fare, was more likely to be a healthy and fertile one. Root vegetables, which we discussed earlier, played an even more critical role here. Parsnips, carrots, turnips, and onions, easily grown and stored, were vital sources of nutrients. Their earthiness and perceived connection to the soil reinforced their association with fertility and grounding energy. Imagine a peasant woman carefully storing her winter carrots, knowing they would not only keep her family fed, but might also contribute to their overall vitality and reproductive well-being. It was a simpler, more direct relationship with the land, where the produce of the earth was revered for its life-giving properties. For protein, peasants often relied on legumes like peas and beans, or dairy products from their livestock. These, too, were recognized for their nourishing qualities. While not glamorous, they provided the building blocks for strength and sustained energy. The prevailing humoral theory applied even here. A diet balanced with these cooler and wetter foods, occasionally supplemented with something warmer, like a few foraged wild herbs, was considered crucial for maintaining health and, by extension, ensuring a good capacity for familial life. Consider the stark contrast between peasant life and royal courts, as often alluded to in historical texts. While Eleanor Herman's Sex with Kings focuses on the excesses of royalty, the implied scarcity and simpler lives of the common folk serve as a backdrop. For peasants, the aphrodisiac was often simply enough food, enough to be healthy, to have the strength for labor, and to conceive and raise children. In their world, a successful harvest was the greatest aphrodisiac of all, promising survival and continuity. The desire for a large family was not just emotional, it was an economic necessity for survival and labor on the land. It's a sobering thought, but one that underscores the fundamental connection between basic sustenance and the drive to perpetuate life. For a quirky tidbit, some very local peasant superstitions involve burying specific root vegetables, like carrots or onions, under the threshold of a newlywed couple's home, believing it would bless the union with fertility. This wasn't about consuming them, but about their symbolic proximity to the marital bed, drawing upon the earth's generative power. It's a quiet, hopeful gesture, deeply rooted in the cycles of nature and the timeless desire for a family. Historians still argue whether the robustness and fertility often observed in peasant communities, despite their hardships, were due to their specific diets or more a result of natural selection, early marriage, and a life of constant physical activity. While their diets lacked variety by modern standards, they were often rich in fiber and whole foods, providing consistent energy. The belief in the earth's inherent fertility, reflected in their humble crops, undoubtedly played a powerful psychological role in their lives and their hopes for the future. So, as you gently drift deeper into slumber, picture the simple, honest meals of medieval peasants eaten by the light of a hearth fire. Each bite, though plain, was laden with the deep, enduring hope for strength, health, and the continuation of life. In their world, the greatest pleasure, and perhaps the truest aphrodisiac, was the simple abundance that allowed them to live, love, and dream of a fruitful future, surrounded by the quiet hum of their resilient lives. From the humble, sustaining meals of the peasantry, we now shift our focus to the more academic, yet equally fascinating, realm of medical texts on libido. In the Middle Ages, while folk wisdom and practical experience guided much of daily life, there was also a flourishing tradition of learned medicine, heavily influenced by ancient Greek and Roman physicians like Hippocrates and Galen, and later by the advancements of Arabic scholars. These scholarly works meticulously detailed theories of the body, its humors, and how diet could be precisely managed to influence everything from overall health to, yes, even the complexities of human desire. Imagine yourself in a dimly lit scriptorium, perhaps within a monastery or a university library. You're poring over a thick vellum-bound manuscript, its pages filled with elegant Latin script and intricate diagrams. This isn't just a cookbook, it's a physician's guide outlining the precise properties of foods and their intended effects on the human constitution. These medical texts were the definitive authorities of their time, offering systematic advice on how to maintain health, cure illness, and, for our purposes, how to subtly or directly influence one's libido. The core of their understanding, as we've noted, was the theory of humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Each humor had specific qualities: hot, cold, wet, dry, and an imbalance was believed to lead to illness or a lack of vigor. When it came to libido, physicians often associated it with the hot and moist qualities, particularly related to the abundance and warmth of blood. Therefore, many of their dietary recommendations for enhancing desire focused on foods that were believed to increase heat and moisture in the body. For example, a physician might prescribe a diet rich in highly nutritious and warming foods for someone experiencing a perceived lack of sexual desire or fertility. This could include dishes featuring specific meats, like pigeon or sparrow, known for their warmth and quick breeding, certain warming spices, ginger, cinnamon, cloves, and invigorating root vegetables, parsnips. The goal was not just to satisfy hunger, but to actively alter the body's internal balance, priming it for procreation. It was a methodical approach, quite different from simply hoping a food might work. Beyond general dietary advice, some texts also delved into specific ailments related to sexual function and offered detailed, if sometimes curious, remedies. For instance, a particular passage might discuss coldness of the womb or lack of seminal vigor, and then suggest precise food combinations to address these issues. This wasn't guesswork. It was a deeply ingrained system of belief, meticulously recorded and studied by the learned elite. Consider the detailed, almost clinical, approach to sexuality within these medical frameworks. Michel Foucault's The History of Sexuality provides profound insights into how medical discourse over centuries categorized and defined human sexuality. While his analysis primarily focuses on later periods, the roots of this categorization are clearly visible in medieval medical texts. These texts often treated sexual activity not just as a natural bodily function, but as something that needed to be managed, balanced, and even optimized for health and procreation. They offered prescriptions not only for when to engage in sexual activity, often dictated by lunar cycles or humoral states, but also what to eat to ensure its success. It was a rational, albeit pseudoscientific, attempt to understand and control human desire. For a quirky tidbit, some medieval medical manuscripts contain recipes for love electuaries, which were thick, sweet pastes or jams often made with honey, ground herbs, and sometimes even powdered animal parts. These were considered highly concentrated aphrodisiacs, meant to be consumed in small, precise doses. One such recipe might call for honey mixed with ground orchid root, believed to resemble testicles and thus impart virility, and a dash of ground cinnamon for warmth. It's a testament to their belief in the power of concentrated natural ingredients, even if the effectiveness was, shall we say, debatable by modern standards. Historians still argue whether the detailed dietary advice in these medieval medical texts had any significant physiological impact beyond basic nutrition, or if their efficacy was largely due to the powerful psychological phenomenon of the placebo effect. While they lacked a modern understanding of biochemistry, the very act of following a prescribed regimen, guided by a learned physician, could instill confidence and a belief in improvement, which might in itself lead to desired outcomes. The intersection of deeply held beliefs and observable or perceived changes in the body remains a fascinating area of study. So, as you gently drift deeper into sleep, imagine the quiet study of a medieval scholar, poring over ancient texts, seeking to unlock the secrets of the human body and its desires through the power of food. In these learned volumes, you find not just recipes, but a window into a world where every bite held potential, where meals were prescribed with the precision of medicine, all aimed at fostering vitality and ensuring the continuity of life, in theory, if not always in practice. From the scholarly tomes of medieval physicians, we now delve into a realm where science met mysticism, where boiling retorts and arcane symbols mingled with the desire for profound transformation, the esoteric world of alchemists, amorous brews. In the Middle Ages, alchemy wasn't just about the fantastical dream of turning base metals into gleaming gold. It was a vast, complex intellectual and practical pursuit encompassing rudimentary chemistry, profound philosophy, meticulous astrology, and a nascent form of medicine. Often, this grand quest for perfecting nature, including human nature, extended to the creation of highly potent elixirs explicitly designed to ignite passion, enhance virility, and promote fertility. Imagine a shadowy alchemist's laboratory, nestled perhaps in the forgotten, dusty wing of a remote castle, or hidden discreetly within a secluded urban dwelling, far from prying eyes. The air is thick with strange, often pungent, fumes emanating from bubbling flasks. The faint glint of polished copper stills catches the occasional flicker of candlelight, and the soft, rhythmic bubbling of liquids fills the otherwise silent space. The alchemist, typically cloaked in an aura of mystery and arcane knowledge, meticulously grinds rare minerals into fine powders, distills curious herbs through complex apparatus, and observes the celestial alignments with painstaking precision. All of this laborious effort was undertaken in the fervent pursuit of unlocking hidden powers, of extracting the very essence or quintessence of ingredients. Believing these concentrated forms would have profound, almost miraculous effects on the human body and mind, far beyond what simple cooking or traditional herbal remedies could achieve. Unlike the common cook, who relied on everyday ingredients and practical experience, or even the learned physician, who adhered to established humoral theories, the alchemists sought to transmute substances, to elevate them to a higher, more potent state. This meant their approach to creating aphrodisiacs was often far more elaborate, sometimes genuinely dangerous due to unknown chemical reactions, and invariably shrouded in profound secrecy, passed down only through cryptic texts or whispered apprenticeships. They might use intricate distillation processes to extract the pure spirit or volatile oils of a warming spice, or employ calcination to reduce a mineral to its pure active form, believing they were isolating its true power. The underlying idea was to create a highly concentrated dose of heat, vitality, or subtlety that could instantly and powerfully stir the passions, rather than merely gently encouraging them. One of the most elusive and sought-after alchemical ingredients for these amorous brews was the mythical philosopher's stone, a substance renowned not only for its purported ability to grant immortality or transmute metals, but also for its rumored capacity to perfect all things, including human desire and fertility. While the stone itself remained an unachieved ideal, the pursuit of such a transmutative substance led to countless fascinating, often desperate experiments with various metals, like gold or silver, believed to have solar or lunar properties, obscure minerals, and exotic organic compounds. Less grand but still popular were meticulously distilled essences of powerful, often symbolically rich herbs like vervain, associated with love and protection, or dill, or potent tinctures made from animal extracts, believed to carry the raw vitality or specific characteristics of the creature from which they were derived. Consider the alchemist's profound approach to the very essence of human life and procreation. Peter Webb's The Erotic Spirit Through History delves into the rich tapestry of philosophical and mystical underpinnings of sexuality in various eras, and while not solely focused on medieval alchemy, it profoundly highlights the enduring human quest to understand, express, and enhance the erotic dimension of life. Alchemists, with their deeply held belief in hidden correspondences between the macrocosm, the cosmos, planets, elements, and the microcosm, the human body, its humors and passions, would attempt to create elixirs that harmonize these universal forces, thereby enhancing an individual's procreative power and allure. They believe that by precisely balancing the hot and cold, wet and dry qualities within their concoctions, and often aligning their work with specific planetary influences, they could create a perfect union of elements within the human body, leading to an optimal state of desire and fertility. It was a cosmic understanding of passion, painstakingly distilled into a tiny vial, reflecting a desire to master nature itself for human ends. For a quirky tidbit, some truly esoteric alchemical texts contain incredibly cryptic and often dangerous recipes for love philters, which went far beyond simple herbal infusions. These might involve the precise collection of moon water at specific astrological conjunctions, such as when Venus was in a certain house, combined with powdered precious stones like ruby for intense passion, or emerald for harmonious fertility, and then ritually boiled, distilled, or left to ferment under very specific conditions. These concoctions were often not just consumed, they might be worn as amulets, dabbed on post points, or even mixed into a lover's drink without their knowledge, of course. The sheer effort, specialized equipment, and profound esoteric knowledge required meant these were truly fringe, upper echelon attempts at manipulating desire, far removed from the common person's simple ginger tea. Imagine the desperate hope, the hours of painstaking labor, and perhaps a touch of madness involved in such intricate and perilous pursuits. Historians still argue vehemently whether alchemical pursuits, particularly those related to the human body and its desires, yielded any tangible physiological results beyond incidental discoveries or the powerful psychological effects of belief. While many alchemical experiments were certainly futile by modern scientific standards, and sometimes even poisonous, the rigorous methodologies, meticulous observations, and the systematic approach to chemical processes laid some foundational groundwork for later chemistry and pharmacology. The belief in a universal essence that could unlock vital forces was incredibly strong and pervasive, and for those who consumed these mysterious brews, the sheer mystique, the high cost, and the ritualistic preparation alone might have induced a profoundly powerful placebo effect. The mind, after all, has a remarkable capacity to influence the body, especially when convinced of a powerful remedy. So, as you gently drift deeper into sleep, imagine the subtle, almost otherworldly glow of a medieval alchemist's lamp, illuminating strange instruments, bubbling glassware, and ancient, cryptic books. Here, hidden from the mundane world, desperate human hopes and curious scientific theories combined in a potent crucible to create elixirs not just for material wealth, but for the elusive, intoxicating gold of human passion. It was a secret world where every bubbling potion held the promise of transforming desire, a fascinating blend of early scientific inquiry, profound philosophy, and ancient magic, slowly dissolving into the realm of your own peaceful dreams. Leaving the mysterious laboratories of the alchemists, we now step into the vibrant, often bewildering, realm of folklore's peculiar pairings, where local beliefs and ancient superstitions profoundly shaped what people ate and how they thought about love and fertility. These weren't based on scientific texts or alchemical distillation, but on generations of whispered tales, observed coincidences, and the deeply ingrained wisdom of the common people. Imagine a rustic village gathering, perhaps around a crackling bonfire, where stories are exchanged along with simple food and drink. Here, the knowledge of which foods brought good luck, or indeed, good love, was passed down through oral tradition. These beliefs were often highly localized, tied to the specific plants, animals, and natural phenomena of a particular region. While sometimes amusingly illogical to our modern minds, they held immense power for medieval folk, offering a sense of control over the unpredictable forces of nature and human emotion. Take, for instance, the belief in the power of eggs. Eggs, universally recognized as symbols of fertility and new life, were frequently incorporated into folk remedies and rituals aimed at promoting conception. Sometimes it wasn't just about eating them. A newlywed couple might be encouraged to share an egg at their wedding feast, or raw eggs might be broken around the foundations of a new home to bless it with abundance and children. The idea was simple. The potential for life contained within the egg was meant to transfer to the couple. It's a beautifully direct piece of sympathetic magic, connecting the microcosm of the egg to the macrocosm of human reproduction. Then there was the curious case of cabbage. While often seen as a humble, everyday vegetable, some European folklore, particularly in Germanic regions, surprisingly linked cabbage to fertility and prolificacy. This might have stemmed from its ability to grow vigorously and its tendency to produce many leaves, or perhaps from ancient associations with the moon, which was often tied to female cycles. It wasn't about stimulating immediate desire, but about fostering long-term fruitfulness. Imagine a medieval farmer's wife tending her cabbage patch with quiet hope for a large family, seeing more than just greens in its robust growth. Even something as common as grains could take on aphrodisiac qualities in certain folk beliefs. Wheat and barley, the very staff of life, were sometimes sprinkled with water from a specific spring, or blessed by a local wise woman, and then used in special breads baked for newlyweds. The idea was that the fertility of the grain would transfer to the couple, ensuring a bountiful harvest of children. It's a lovely example of how deeply intertwined agricultural life was with personal hopes and dreams. Consider the pervasive influence of sympathetic magic, which, as Peter Webb's The Erotic Spirit Through History explores, was a fundamental way pre-modern societies understood their world. This involved the belief that like affects like, or that parts could influence the whole. The shape of a food, like a phallic root vegetable, or the reproductive organs of an animal, its color, red for passion, its growth habit, prolific vines for abundance, or its observed animal behavior, the virility of certain birds or mammals, were all taken as signs of its hidden powers. These observations, filtered through generations of storytelling, solidified into widely accepted folk wisdom about what to eat for love or fertility. For a quirky tidbit, in some rural parts of medieval England, it was believed that if a woman wanted to conceive, she should eat a piece of bread baked with a single, perfectly round pebble inside it. The pebble symbolized the potential child, and consuming it was meant to absorb that potential. Of course, care had to be taken not to chip a tooth, or worse. It highlights the somewhat desperate, yet earnest lengths people would go to, relying on such peculiar rituals rooted in deep-seated magical beliefs. Historians still argue whether these widespread folk beliefs were merely quaint superstitions, or if they played a vital psychological role in providing comfort and a sense of agency in a world where fertility and survival were often precarious. While modern science would largely dismiss their direct efficacy, the power of collective belief and the rituals surrounding these food practices undoubtedly offered hope and strengthened community bonds, subtly influencing behavior and perception. The act of partaking in these traditions, even without a direct biological effect, could instill confidence and a sense of preparedness for the future. So, as you gently drift deeper into sleep, imagine the quiet murmur of old stories in a medieval village, tales of eggs and cabbages holding secret promises. These peculiar pairings, woven into the fabric of daily life, offered simple hopes and a gentle magic, reflecting humanity's timeless desire for love, family, and the enduring rhythms of life, quietly lulling you into your own peaceful dreams. Moving from the quaint peculiarities of folklore, we now tread a more cautious path into the shadowy corners of taboos and forbidden delights. Even in the Middle Ages, with its fervent religious strictures, pervasive societal norms, and the ever-present eye of the church, human desire found ways to manifest, sometimes pushing subtly against the boundaries of what was considered acceptable or even morally permissible, and occasionally certain foods, precisely because they were taboo, difficult to acquire, or strongly associated with illicit desires or supernatural forces, gained an intriguing, almost dangerous allure as aphrodisiacs. The thrill of the forbidden often added its own potent spice to the medieval culinary landscape. Imagine a hushed conversation exchanged in a dimly lit corner of a medieval inn, far from the prying ears of gossips or priests, or a furtive, knowing glance exchanged over a meal that felt just a little too rich, a little too stimulating for a pious soul. While most dietary advice aimed at promoting wholesome procreative love within the bounds of marriage, there were always those who sought to ignite a more illicit, intense, or even unnatural passion, sometimes through foods associated with pagan rituals, dark magic, or simply excessive sinful indulgence. These were the forbidden fruits in a metaphorical sense, and sometimes quite literally, if they involved rare or ritually prepared ingredients. One of the most prominent taboos revolved around certain animal parts that were considered unclean, associated with witchcraft, or simply too primal and base for regular consumption. While we briefly touched on the controversial use of animal testicles, a truly fringe and often dangerous practice, other examples included the consumption of animal blood, or parts of creatures considered demonic or magical, like certain reptiles or even carrion birds. Consuming these was not only physically risky, but often deeply sacrilegious, inviting divine wrath or suspicion of witchcraft. Yet, precisely because they were forbidden and carried an aura of raw, untamed power, they were sometimes believed by desperate individuals to be incredibly potent aphrodisiacs, capable of stirring a passion beyond the ordinary, a desire stripped of societal constraints. The idea was that by partaking in the forbidden, one could tap into a darker, more intense, almost primal form of desire, unchecked by typical inhibitions. It's a classic case of rebellion against norms, enacted right there in the clandestine kitchen or at a secret table. Then there were foods associated with gluttony and excessive indulgence. While not explicitly taboo in the sense of being forbidden by law or strictly by church doctrine, unless part of a fast, extreme overconsumption of very rich, fatty, or highly spiced foods was consistently condemned as one of the 7 deadly sins. The church preached moderation and asceticism, yet these very foods, succulent, fatty meats, copious amounts of heavily spiced wine, overly sweet and rich confections, were also precisely what medieval people, drawing on humoral theories, believed would stimulate the body, inflame the humors, and enhance fertility and desire. The paradox was evident and often a source of internal conflict. The very things that could lead to spiritual downfall and damnation were also believed to provoke intense carnal desire and bodily vigor. It created a fascinating tension between sacred duty and earthly pleasure. A medieval person, struggling with their conscience over a particularly decadent and stimulating meal, might experience a heightened sense of guilt, which could, perversely, amplify the perceived effects of the food through psychological arousal and the transgression of boundaries. The enjoyment was perhaps magnified by the subtle thrill of sin. Consider the intricate balance the church tried to strike in regulating all aspects of life, including diet and sexuality. Michel Foucault's The History of Sexuality, particularly his profound analysis of the confession and the rise of pastoral power, sheds immense light on how even the most private thoughts and intimate desires became subject to meticulous moral scrutiny and stringent ecclesiastical control. The Church's tireless efforts to define, categorize, and punish sins of the flesh implicitly acknowledged the pervasive power of such desires, and by extension, the things, including certain foods and drinks, that might provoke or inflame them. The very act of forbidding something, of labeling it sinful, paradoxically gave it a certain power, mystique, and often an undeniable allure. It was a constant, uneasy negotiation between divine law, strict moral codes, and the resilient, often unruly complexities of human nature. For a quirky tidbit, some medieval folktales, often passed down in hushed whispers rather than written texts, recount stories of desperate individuals attempting to create truly forbidden love potions using ingredients gathered from unsettling places like graveyards, or even illicitly from consecrated church grounds, mixed with potent, often hallucinogenic or dangerously toxic herbs. These concoctions were clearly beyond the pale of acceptable practice, bordering overtly on black magic and witchcraft, and were viewed with profound fear and condemnation. Their supposed power came not just from the dubious ingredients, but crucially from the sheer transgressive act of acquiring and preparing them, invoking dark forces. Thankfully, such extreme and dangerous practices were exceedingly rare, largely existing in fearful legends and cautionary tales. It makes one profoundly grateful for modern, infinitely less risky dating strategies, doesn't it? Perhaps a simple coffee date is quite preferable to a graveyard potion. Historians still argue whether the alluring power of taboo foods as aphrodisiacs was truly about any perceived physiological effect they might have had, or if it was predominantly about the intense psychological thrill of transgression, the defiance of norms, and the heightened senses associated with illicit acts. The forbidden often carries its own intoxicating power, a sense of heightened sensation and daring. Medieval people were no strangers to the complex interplay between desire, sin, social expectations, and the human psyche. The very act of consuming something forbidden, stepping outside the bounds of convention, might have created a powerful psychological release, a surge of adrenaline, which could then be interpreted and experienced as arousal or heightened passion, proving that sometimes the mind is the most potent aphrodisiac of all. So, as you gently drift deeper into sleep, imagine the subtle tension in a medieval room, perhaps a knowing, conspiratorial look exchanged over a dish that felt just a little too rich, a little too daring, a whispered secret shared under the cloak of night. In these hidden corners of medieval life, desire sometimes pushed boldly against the strict boundaries of belief and societal expectation, finding a peculiar and often dangerous potency in the very act of consuming the forbidden, a quiet whisper of illicit passion echoing through the ages, slowly lulling you into the quiet depths of your own dreams. Having explored the often secret world of forbidden delights, let's now consider a more universal aspect of medieval dining that powerfully influenced perception and desire: the power of presentation. In an era before glossy food photography and celebrity chefs, how food was served, arranged, and celebrated was almost as important as the ingredients themselves. The visual spectacle, the aroma, and the very ritual of the meal amplified its perceived value, and crucially, its ability to entice and impress. Imagine stepping into a grand medieval hall, perhaps for a feast or a special dinner. Before you even taste a bite, your eyes are drawn to the elaborate platters, the intricate arrangements of food, the vibrant colors, and the sheer artistry on display. This wasn't accidental. Medieval cooks and banquet organizers understood instinctively that we eat first with our eyes. A dish meant to inspire love or fertility wouldn't just be prepared with potent ingredients. It would be presented in a way that heightened anticipation and subtly communicated its special purpose. Consider the role of color. Vibrant reds, oranges, and yellows, often achieved through natural dyes from saffron, madder, or turmeric, were not just aesthetically pleasing. They were often associated with warmth, vitality, and passion. A richly spiced meat dish, perhaps gilded with gold leaf. Yes, edible gold leaf existed and was used for status and perceived health benefits, would not only signify wealth, but also suggest an inner glow and vigor. Imagine a medieval lady being served a vivid red jelly, molded into an intricate shape, infused with rosewater and honey, subtly hinting at warmth and affection. It's a feast for the eyes, promising more than just sweetness. Then there was the scent. The aroma of food played a crucial role in medieval dining, particularly for dishes intended to be aphrodisiac. Spices, as we explored earlier, were paramount not just for taste, but for their heady, intoxicating perfumes. Imagine the mingled scents of cinnamon, cloves, and ginger wafting from a roast or a sweet pudding. These aromatic profiles were meticulously crafted, designed to awaken the senses, prepare the palate, and subtly stir desires even before the first bite. A beautifully scented dish was already halfway to its amorous goal. The symbolism of shape and arrangement was also incredibly important. Foods that naturally resembled fertility symbols, like figs or pomegranates, were often showcased prominently. Elaborate subtleties, decorative food sculptures made from sugar paste or molded jellies, might depict romantic scenes, allegories of love, or mythical creatures associated with desire. A clever cook might arrange smaller, more suggestive items in a way that hinted at the dish's true intent without being overtly vulgar, lending an air of sophisticated intrigue. It's a bit like modern food styling, but with a deeper, more symbolic layer. Consider the theatricality of royal feasts as described in various historical accounts, including those alluded to in works like Eleanor Herman's Sex with Kings. The procession of dishes, often carried in by servants to the sound of trumpets, was a performance in itself. The most elaborate and symbolically potent dishes would be presented with flair, perhaps under a cover that was dramatically lifted to reveal the dazzling contents. This ritual elevated the food beyond mere sustenance. It transformed it into an event, enhancing the psychological impact on the diners. A carefully placed, beautifully presented aphrodisiac dish became part of the seduction, a silent yet powerful participant in the unfolding drama of desire and power. For a quirky tidbit, some medieval banquets featured surprise dishes where, for instance, a large pie might, upon being cut, release live birds, or a roasted animal might be reassembled with its feathers or fur to appear alive. While these were primarily for entertainment, they added to the sensory overload and the sense of wonder, making the entire meal a truly memorable experience. This heightened emotional state, whether of delight or surprise, could certainly contribute to a more open, less inhibited mood, perhaps indirectly fostering a more amorous atmosphere. Imagine the sheer shock and delight of birds flying out of your dinner. Historians still argue whether the elaborate presentation of food primarily served as a display of wealth and status, or if its psychological impact on enhancing appetite and mood, and thus indirectly desire, was equally significant. While the direct physiological effects of presentation are minimal, the power of expectation, ritual, and aesthetic pleasure on the human psyche is undeniable. A meal that delights all the senses sets a powerful stage for any desired outcome, including matters of the heart. So, as you gently drift deeper into sleep, imagine the flickering candlelight illuminating a beautifully arranged medieval feast, the vibrant colors, the enticing aromas, and the silent language of desire communicated through every artfully placed dish. In the Middle Ages, long before words were necessary, food itself, in its presentation, whispered its intentions, inviting all who beheld it to part a feast for both body and soul, quietly lulling you into sweet dreams. From the artful presentation of medieval banquets, we now approach a lighter, often humorous side of our historical journey, love potions gone wrong. For all the earnest belief, meticulous preparation, and sometimes elaborate rituals, the path to amorous success was rarely smooth, and medieval attempts at culinary seduction, like many human endeavors driven by hope and desperation, often ended not in passionate embrace, but in comical mishaps, embarrassing miscommunications, or even disastrous, unintended side effects. It's a delightful reminder that even in an age steeped in magic and superstition, human fallibility and the unpredictable nature of chemistry, however rudimentary their understanding, often held sway. Imagine the nervous anticipation of a medieval suitor, perhaps a young squire or a hopeful merchant, clutching a carefully prepared confection wrapped in a bit of cloth, convinced it holds the secret key to winning a reluctant lady's heart. Or picture a desperate wife, perhaps tired of her husband's wandering eye, secretly brewing a particularly potent, heavily spiced drink, hoping to rekindle a flagging romance and bring his affections back home. The stage is set, the intentions are clear, and the hopeful heart beats fast. But sometimes, the universe, or perhaps just bad judgment and even worse chemistry, had entirely different plans. It reminds you that even with the best intentions and the strongest beliefs in arcane properties, things can go spectacularly, hilariously, and sometimes dangerously awry. One common way love potions went wrong involved the widespread problem of misidentification or miscalculation of ingredients. With limited botanical knowledge, no standardized measurements, and heavy reliance on local folk remedies passed down by word of mouth, a perfectly harmless or even beneficial herb could be easily mistaken for a toxic look-alike, or a subtle nuance in preparation, like boiling versus infusing, could be entirely missed. Imagine a well-meaning individual mistakenly brewing a tea with a potent hallucinogenic plant like henbane or belladonna, both known to grow in Europe and used in folk medicine, albeit dangerously, instead of a benign, sweet-smelling herb, hoping for a flush of passion and heightened senses. Instead of subtle allure, they might induce a rather uncomfortable, perhaps even life-threatening, fit of delirium, violent hallucinations, or incapacitating illness. Such an outcome would certainly make for a memorable evening, though perhaps not in the way intended by the hopeful lover. The ensuing confusion, fear, and indeed, physical illness would quickly put a definitive damper on any romantic overtures, probably leading to a rather swift exit, or even a panic call for a physician, not a kiss. Another frequent source of mishap was simply overdoing it. The classic, if a little is good, a lot must be better fallacy. If a small pinch of ginger was believed to impart warmth and gently stimulate desire, surely a heap of ginger, combined with a mountain of cinnamon and a vat of spiced wine, would be even more effective for sparking uncontrollable passion, right? Not necessarily. Too much of a good thing, particularly strong spices, pungent herbs, or potent raw ingredients, could lead to severe digestive upset, uncontrollable sweating, alarming palpitations, or a general feeling of profound discomfort and misery rather than subtle arousal. Picture a nervous suitor having consumed a truly excessive amount of what he believed to be an invigorating concoction, spending his evening not in charming flirtation or romantic declarations, but perhaps doubled over in agony, deeply regretting his culinary choices in the nearest privy. It's rather hard to be charming or seductive when you're battling a severe stomachache, dizzy spells, or an uncomfortably flushed face, after all. The desired effect of alluring warmth might quickly turn into an unappealing, feverish sweat. Consider the rich narrative possibilities that such failures presented in medieval popular literature and jest. While historical chronicles and more serious accounts like Eleanor Herman's Sex with Kings often focus on successful, or at least powerfully influential, royal amours, many a medieval fableau, a short, humorous, often bawdy verse tale common in France, or folk story delighted in recounting the amusing misfortunes and farcical predicaments of those who dabbled ineptly in love magic. There are countless tales of potions that, instead of causing passionate love, led to uncontrollable bouts of laughter, sudden bursts of sneezing, or, most comically, made the recipient fall for the wrong person entirely. Perhaps the unattractive kitchen maid who prepared it, or even a donkey in the stable, rather than the beautiful noble lady it was originally intended for. Imagine the sheer chaos and social embarrassment that would erupt in a medieval court or a village square if everyone started falling madly in love with the most inappropriate individuals because of a misdirected or poorly concocted love potion. It adds a wonderfully delightful layer of human folly and slapstick comedy to the grand tapestry of medieval history, proving that even back then, life could be quite the sitcom. For a quirky tidbit, a particularly amusing medieval anecdote, often passed down through oral tradition in rural communities, tells of a village woman who, desperate to make her husband more affectionate and attentive, tried to sneak a supposedly powerful herb, valerian, known for its calming and sedative properties today, but then sometimes associated in folklore with attracting cats and, by extension, perhaps a lover's elusive attention, into his evening stew. Unfortunately, in her zeal, she added far, far too much. Instead of becoming passionately devoted or romantically invigorated, her husband became profoundly, irrepressibly sleepy, falling asleep mid-conversation at the dinner table, his head thudding gently onto the wooden board, much to his wife's utter exasperation and the children's quiet amusement. It was perhaps not the most disastrous outcome for a love potion, certainly less hazardous than a deadly nightshade concoction, but it was absolutely not the desired one. Sometimes the best laid plans of mice and medieval men and women simply lead to a very early, very unplanned bedtime, making for a quiet, if romantically unproductive, evening. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of these failed love potions in medieval folklore and anecdote served primarily as cautionary tales, designed to reinforce societal norms against tampering with the natural order of things, or if they simply functioned as a much-needed comedic outlet for the unpredictable and often frustrating nature of human relationships and the undeniable limitations of folk magic. It's highly probable it was a bit of both. The unpredictable and often ridiculous outcomes provided a humbling reminder that true desire, unlike a recipe, could not always be neatly controlled, forced, or conjured with a few ingredients. The very concept of love potions gone wrong also subtly underscored the powerful, almost uncontrollable nature of genuine affection, something that couldn't be commanded or compelled by any concoction, no matter how potent its ingredients or how elaborate its preparation. True love, the stories hinted, had to be authentic, not brewed. So, as you gently drift deeper into sleep, imagine the quiet, perhaps slightly comedic, chaos of a medieval night. Perhaps a frustrated lover gazing at a snoring partner, a confused recipient wondering why they suddenly felt so ill, and a love potion that fizzled, quite literally or figuratively. These tales of misadventure, of hopes dashed and plans thwarted, remind us that while the medieval pursuit of love through food and magic was earnest and deeply believed, it was also profoundly human, often ending not in grand romance, but in the delightful, sometimes awkward, comedy of errors, quietly lulling you into your own peaceful dreams, perhaps with a newfound appreciation for simpler forms of courtship. After our journey through the delightful, the bizarre, and sometimes the disastrous attempts at culinary love spells, we arrive at our final reflection, the enduring allure of food in love. While medieval beliefs about aphrodisiacs might seem quaint or even amusing to us today, they offer a profound glimpse into humanity's timeless desire for connection, fertility, and passion. The specific ingredients and theories may have changed, but the fundamental instinct to use food as a tool for seduction and bonding remains remarkably consistent. Imagine for a moment stepping back into the modern world. What do we do when we want to express love, celebrate an anniversary, or simply spend quality time with someone special? We often share a meal. We cook a romantic dinner, go to a fancy restaurant, or share a bottle of wine. While we no longer believe that oysters magically boost our libido because of their humoral qualities, or that ginger warms our humors for procreation, we still instinctively reach for them. Why? Because we understand, perhaps unconsciously, that food plays a powerful psychological and emotional role in human relationships. The medieval understanding, though dressed in the language of humors and sympathetic magic, intuitively grasps something fundamental. Food is sensual. It engages all our senses: the aroma of a simmering sauce, the vibrant colors of fresh ingredients, the sizzle of fat in a pan, the varied textures on our palate, and of course the taste. These sensory experiences can evoke pleasure, comfort, and a sense of shared intimacy. When we prepare or share food with someone, we are often sharing a part of ourselves, an act of nurturing and connection that transcends mere sustenance. Moreover, food has always been deeply intertwined with hospitality and vulnerability. To offer someone food is an act of welcome and trust. To accept it is to be vulnerable, to allow another to nourish you. This creates a powerful bond. In the Middle Ages, offering a well-prepared meal, particularly one laden with what were believed to be invigorating ingredients, was a profound gesture of affection and hope for a shared future, whether that future was a family, a partnership, or simply a night of passion. Consider the historical echoes of these medieval practices in our contemporary world. While scientific understanding has replaced humoral theory, our fascination with aphrodisiac foods persists. Chocolates, strawberries, asparagus, and oysters still frequently appear on romantic menus. We talk about food setting the mood or being indulgent or decadent. These modern associations are direct descendants of medieval beliefs, stripped of their pseudo-scientific explanations, but retaining their powerful psychological resonance. We intuitively link richness, sweetness, and unique textures with pleasure, and by extension, desire. For a final comforting thought, the enduring allure of food and love lies not in its ability to magically force affection, but in its capacity to create an experience. A romantic meal, whether medieval or modern, is an event. It's time dedicated to connection, to shared enjoyment, and to the subtle art of courtship. The careful preparation, the beautiful presentation, the shared act of consumption. All these elements build intimacy and foster a sense of well-being that is conducive to love in all its forms. Historians, anthropologists, and psychologists continue to explore the intricate relationship between food, culture, and human desire. From ancient rituals to modern dating customs, food remains a universal language of affection, a powerful tool for expressing care, initiating courtship, and celebrating the deepest bonds. The medieval period, with its charmingly earnest beliefs, simply offers a vivid illustration of this timeless human endeavor. So, as we bring our journey to a close, and you finally surrender to the depths of sleep, remember that the quest for love, like a well-prepared meal, is a rich and layered experience. From the exotic spices of distant lands to the humble roots from the earth, from the grand banquets of kings to the quiet meals of peasants, food has always been there, a silent, comforting, and utterly captivating participant in the enduring human story of desire. As our long, winding journey through the medieval culinary landscape of love now gently draws to its close, and the whispers of ancient beliefs begin to fade into the soft mists of memory, let your mind slowly, peacefully drift away. The vibrant feast halls, the shadowy alchemist labs, the bustling markets, and the quiet monastic refectories, all these vivid images of a bygone era now soften at the edges, dissolving into the quietude of the approaching night. Feel the tension in your shoulders ease. The last lingering thoughts of strange concoctions and peculiar pairings gently release their hold. There is no longer a need to analyze, to question, or to seek hidden meanings. Instead, allow the subtle echoes of these historical stories to simply wash over you like a calming, unseen tide. The passionate desires of medieval hearts, their hopeful quests for connection and fertility, and their earnest attempts to influence fate through the foods they ate, now transform into a soothing lullaby, a quiet testament to the timeless threads that bind all humanity across the centuries. Let the final impressions be of warmth, of comfort, and of the profound human connection that, regardless of era or belief, always finds its expression through shared nourishment and tender gestures. The grand banquet, the humble pottage, the whispered love spell, the hearty laugh at a potion gone awry. These are merely facets of a deeper, more enduring truth. Embrace the stillness that settles around you, the deepening quiet as the world outside prepares for rest. Your journey through the history of medieval aphrodisiacs is complete, and as the last vestiges of the day gently recede, may you find a profound and undisturbed peace. Sweet dreams, everyone. And perhaps when you wake, you'll look at your breakfast a little differently. What historical food belief surprised you the most on this journey tonight?